Thanks, Jens. Oh, yeah, thank you very much. Thanks, Jens, and thanks for that introduction. And Lynn, Jens, you're a great guy. I don't care what Jim Viola says about you. So, but yeah, pleased to be here. Thank you, Redbird, for the invitation. And be kind. I'm up here alone and unafraid, and there's not much surface area to this podium, so no throwing things. But you guys have probably seen me yesterday, kind of lurking in the back of the rooms, listening to the tons of information that's being provided, as well as the robust conversation. So I really appreciate being here. I really appreciate hearing the various perspectives on the different issues affecting GA. So let me see. Okay, yeah, I got the slides down there. So today I'm going to get an opportunity to kind of share with you some of the things that are going on. What's the FAA got up our sleeves, and what's changed since last year. But first, a little bit about me. Again, I'm Everette Rochon. I'm the manager of the Training and Certification Group in the General Aviation and Commercial Division. I'll get into a little bit more specifics about the organization. I'm a Navy background, like Jens was saying, NATOPS officer, and then Part 141 flight instructor. Went to the airlines, had a cup of coffee there before the airline went bankrupt. I was there for 5 years, and then moved on to the Pentagon and worked flying hour programs and flight simulation programs for the Air Force before coming to the FAA in 2009. When I joined the FAA, I joined the General Aviation and Commercial Division, and I've been there ever since. And it's not because they locked the doors and wouldn't let me out, but because I'm really passionate about general aviation. And so I'm an aircraft owner. I fly in the system. And so I really appreciate what you all do every day, the hard work that you put in to make sure that GA is safe and it's accessible. And I think we share that in common. So hopefully today's presentation you'll kind of see that come out. I'll speak personally for myself. My first instinct is not to regulate. My first instinct is to try to reduce as many barriers as possible, so that again we have those mutual interests. And then when it comes to policy, please let us know where policy gets in the way and is a barrier to what you do, and then we can help reduce those barriers when it's the right thing to do. Regulations is a little tougher, as you've heard from Elizabeth and Jens, but we're doing a lot of work there as well, and I'll share that with you. So these are some of the things that we're going to talk about. I'll cover some of the organizational changes in the General Aviation and Commercial Division, as well as touch on some of the up-to-date instructional accident statistics. From there, we'll move into giving you an update on the current rulemaking and policies, and then we'll complete with what we're proposing or set to propose as far as a future Part 141 Aviation Rulemaking Committee. And then afterwards, we'll take your questions. So, organizational changes. I'll first talk about the things that have migrated out of the General Aviation and Commercial Division, but let me back up a little bit from there. So when it comes to flight standards, there's really two main sides that you're concerned about. One is the General Aviation Safety Assurance side of the house, so those are the FSDOs with the POIs that you're most familiar with. And then there's the safety standards side of the house. So that's where the policy divisions are. That's General Aviation and Commercial Division. That's where my division is. And while I'm talking about the policy divisions, we have a policy division, of course, on the aircraft maintenance side. So while I'm thinking about it, Bob asked me to put a plug in for him right after this presentation. They're going to be talking about some of the issues having to do with the maintenance side of the house, A&Ps, and that workforce and the shortage there. So please, if you have an opportunity to go and visit Bob's presentation, do so. But back to some of the policy areas that migrated out of the General Aviation and Commercial Division. So we had the Aviation Training Device policy under 61.4. That has been transferred over to the Air Transportation Division. The Air Transportation Policy Division is the one, of course, on the air carrier side of the house, the UPSs, Deltas, et cetera. And so over now on the Air Transportation Division side, there is the Part 60 flight simulation training devices now, as well as the aviation training devices. One of our folks from my group went over with that policy to them, so there's continuity there, and so he's over working the LOAs for ATVs. What we have also migrated out of AFS 800 is also the safety promotion safety promotion group. And so you guys might remember that. That's the group that has the FAST team. So that group is no longer in AFS 800, and now the FAST team has migrated over to the safety assurance side of the house. So that's with there's a division there that has the FAST team, and of course all the FPMs, et cetera, that are in the FISDOs, that part remains. So, and I'll talk to you a little bit about what that means for what our division and what it looks like there. We still have the magazine, the Safety Amp magazine in our division, and we still have overall policy for safety promotion in the General Aviation and Commercial Division. What has come in? So what's come into the General Aviation Commercial Division, and specifically my group, is airline transport pilot certificates. So for the first time now we have pilot certificates from student pilot all the way through ATP in the General Aviation and Commercial Division. Drones, AFS 700 is the new Emerging Technologies Division. So the Part 107 Airman certificates, those are now with the Emerging Technologies Division. And if you've got a sense of a sigh of relief out of me, then you're absolutely right, because that was a real busy time of my life, dealing with drones for a couple of years. But so that's with them. So where's the division there between the pilot certification and policy activities between us and the Emergency Technologies Division? The separation there is around 1,300 pounds. I think 1,320 is the exact number. So anything unmanned less than that weight is going to be with the Emergency Technologies Division, and then anything that is manned or greater than that weight, unmanned, is going to be in the General Aviation and Commercial Division. So hopefully that's clear as mud. So now let's, I got one other kind of organizational change to share with you before I get to the specific slide. You guys may remember AFS 600, which is the Regulatory Support Division. That's the division that had ACS, PTS, handbooks, airman knowledge testings. That's also the division that had designee policy, DPEs. That division has disbanded, and those specific issues have migrated into my division, the General Aviation and Commercial Division. But I'll show you a little bit more about that. Other minor changes, but those are the things I think you'd be interested in. So that's what our division structure looks like today. Again, on the Office of Safety Standards side of the house, Brad Palmer is our division manager, and my boss. We have 3 groups. So we have a terminology groups now instead of branches. And so working from right to left, you see the delegation group. So the delegation group is the one that we inherited from the regulatory support division that I mentioned. So the new AFS 850 is you can see the different sections that are underneath the group. You have the operations delegation section, that's with DPEs and that policy, and then you also have the airworthiness delegation section and the product delegation section as well. In the middle, the operations group. Not too many changes with this group. You have the authorized and certified operations section. So that section is the one that houses the policy and regulation for Part 91, piston and turbine, large aircraft, non-common carriage under Part 125, Part 133, rotorcraft external loads, is also in there. 91 subpart K, fractional ownership programs is also in that section, among other things, public aircraft operations, etc. The general aviation operations section is balloons, parachutes, air shows, aviation events. Let's see, what else is in there? Experimental aircraft, light sport aircraft, experimental amateur built. Those are the issues that are in the general aviation operations section. The special program section right now, that's the one that used to house the drones in our division, but now just has the safety magazine. And so now we get to my group, the kind of last on this slide, but first in your heart, the training and certification group, AFS 810. We've got the certification section and the training section. Those sections are ones that have been in our group since our last realignment back in 2017. And I think what's new there for you all is that testing standards section, which we inherited from, again, the regulatory support division. So that's the section that has the ACS PTS handbooks and airman knowledge testing. So now all of those are going to be, so for the first time really in the general aviation and commercial division, we're going to have the pilot training and certification system all together. And then of course the delegation side under the same umbrella with respect to the division. So that's what's new there. We've got about 45 folks, including contractors now in the training and certification group. So we're going to be extremely busy as we already have been, and you'll see that here as I go through the slides. Okay, instructional accident statistics. So we're obviously very focused on safety. Obviously, we are focused on the GA fatal accident rate. Daily, we get a briefing on what those statistics are. We get a briefing, a morning meeting on the what have been the accidents and incidents from the previous day or over the weekend. So I think Elizabeth said, hey, anything more than 0 is unacceptable, and totally agree with that. We're always striving for 0 when it comes to GA fatal accident rate. I'll kind of go into the specific instructional accident statistics, but again, we get the statistics for overall GA and broken up into the various aircraft types and sectors as well. Hopefully you can see this. There's this is the Part 91 fatal accidents by flight purpose, and that's up through 2023. And so the very bottom bar, the longest bar there, is personal flying. That's the typical GA pilot that goes flying on the weekend, enjoying general aviation activities. The next highest bar there, the next one up, is the instructional bar. Not as big, but still bigger than we would like it to be. And just for perspective, it's higher than or bigger than the aerial application or Part 137 agricultural operations, higher than flight tests, etc. Part 91, instructional flights. This is from the dashboard from 2012 to 2021. What you can see there is the black bar, which is or the black graph, which is total accident rate, and then and you can see that on a slight decrease over time. So that's some good news. And with respect to the fatal, which is the blue graph, you can see that that has a slight decrease over time. Again, these are instructional flights. General Aviation Accident Dashboard through 2021 instructional flights. On the left-hand side, you see the accidents by phase of flight, both fatal and non-fatal, fatal being in the light blue, the largest bar being landing phase of flight, the next highest being takeoff. So not totally unexpected for instructional flights, but again, too high. After I leave here, after this presentation, as a matter of fact, pretty close to it, I'll be flying up to Washington, D.C. to attend the General Aviation Joint Safety Committee, again, where we're focused on safety enhancements. And one of the initiatives, I know that with Charlie Precourt, Wally, and others, we're working to see how we can do better to incorporate and promote the use of angle of attack indicators in general aviation aircraft, in particular in the flight instruction community. I think we've seen some data that supports that initiative. On the right-hand side here, accidents by defining event, and the biggest bars, the top three there, you see abnormal runway contact, loss of control on the ground, and loss of control in flight. Not something that you could probably predict from instructional flights, but again, I think it helps to highlight what some of the areas that need some focus and attention in the instructional community. So, current rulemaking and policy priorities. Jens and Elizabeth covered some areas that are, from the FAA reauthorization standpoint, or focus areas, some focus areas from a gamma standpoint as well as an AOPA standpoint. And so I think the avenues that we're moving down are all aligned with that. Obviously, there's no way we can move fast enough when it comes to rulemaking, especially when that rulemaking is supportive of advancements in technology and it's deregulatory. So, but I think the other thing is that as we see these initiatives that come out of the Hill when it comes to rulemaking, I mean, so in a lot of cases, rulemaking we're already working. It's just that they're trying to force timetables on this, and I think the point I want to emphasize is that a rulemaking is a slow and it's a deliberative process. It's supposed to be an interactive process with the public, including the communities of interest like you. So I think hey, from our perspective, obviously we want to get it right, and you wouldn't want rulemaking to move super fast, because that's when you miss things, that's when you don't incorporate things, and that's when you don't have the ability to communicate. So I have some examples of where we're trying to have those interactions. Just from a resource perspective, when it comes to our folks in the FAA, I think rulemaking is probably the hardest thing you can do in the agency. It's very time consuming. Rulemaking is one of the highest priorities, along with CSOP, which is the Certification Service Oversight Process, I think is the acronym, which is, hey, we've got this backlog of certifications that need to take place under 135, 141, et cetera, but there's backlog. So those are the highest priorities in the flight standards service among them. And so from that standpoint, our folks are zeroed in on that, and they're really working hard to get this out, these rulemakings out as quickly as possible. And there's a whole process to that, as you can imagine. And so we're making progress, and I'll detail what some of those, the status of some of those are. Our goal is not just creating regulations and policy, but obviously we want to continuously improve, deregulate where we can, but at the same time we want to enable technologies and where the industry is going, and specifically the flight training community as well. So these are some of the rulemakings that are in the flight training, of interest to at least to the flight training organizations and providers. Powered lift, of course, enabling, and that notice of proposed rulemaking, and really all of these except for Mosaic are on track to finalize in 2024. So that's kind of going out on a limb when it comes to rulemaking, as you know. And probably not going to get any more narrow than that when it comes to, hey, when can we expect to see the final rule with respect to these, because there's just so many unknowns and communication that has to happen internally with respect to rulemaking. But rest assured, all of our teams are working as fast as they can and under a lot of stress and pressure to get these rulemakings right and get them out the door for implementation as well. And that's another point to make, that once a rule is final, that's only one piece of it. Obviously, there's a larger implementation piece of that takes a lot of time and energy, all of the guidance and advisory documents. When a rule finalizes, we know that you all have to implement that rule. You need time to implement that rule. It takes time from publication, normally 60 days to where the rule has to be implemented. So that's your time to look and see what has gone from proposal to a final rule. The guidance documents and associated documents are required to be published at that point in time as well. So along with the final rule published in the Federal Register, there's, generally speaking, there's going to be an email address where you can, if you have questions about the final rule or what it means or how to implement if those things are not in guidance or in policy as clearly as they can, ask those questions through those email addresses, and we'll have people that will respond to those. So kind of back to the list here. So powered lift, Mosaic that Elizabeth and Jens already spoke to. So we have the proposals out there. The comments have come in, and so we'll see what the final rule looks like. But certainly, each of the comments that come in for all of these rules have to be considered and responded to. The ACS PTS incorporation by reference, understand, and Jens expressed it with respect to the ACS work group, and that is just one of those challenges that comes with the Administrative Procedures Act. And the communication that it really, for ex parte reasons, have to conclude under the rulemaking. However, we really anticipate that, obviously with ACS PTS, this is going to be an ongoing rulemaking endeavor. There's always going to be changes that need to occur with respect to ACS PTS. Probably not frequent, but it's going to happen. And so the ACS work group, that type of support is going to always be leaned on when it comes to rulemaking. And so what that process is going to look like is still kind of yet to be determined, but we also understand that it needs to be more nimble than the traditional rulemaking process. PAOSAC is Public Aircraft Operations Special Airworthiness Certificate, just incorporating the ability of public aircraft operators, the pilots, to log flying time towards civil requirements, and SAC. That's the whole convoluted court case with respect to LOTAs just don't want to get into that. That's a tough one. Flight instructor expiration date. Elizabeth mentioned that. That rulemaking is progressing, and we also have that final rule targeted for 2024. Removal of the expiration date. So now the flight instructor certificate is going to be recency of experience based. SFAR 73, another notice of proposed rulemaking expected to finalize this year. That is the special federal aviation regulations specific to the operations and pilot proficiency and training requirements in Robinson helicopters, specifically the 22 and the 44. So this rulemaking was really just to align a lot of the FAA documents, the airworthiness directives, and some of the other, training concerns when it came to main rotor airframe contact accidents that occurred in the Robinson. So we really expect that this is going to be a two-phase rulemaking. One is going to be the one here that you see, and then there's going to be at some point a follow-on rulemaking, because this rulemaking is going to have an expiration date for the SFAR. SFARs were never intended to be permanent, so just like the powered lift, SFAR is going to have an expiration date, 10 years. This SFAR was supposed to have that type of expiration date. This rulemaking will put that date there, and then the FAA will have to have follow-on rulemaking if we want to incorporate those requirements that are in the SFAR 73 for Robinson helicopters, if those are going to get incorporated into 14 CFR, into the regulations. Here's two initiatives just from a policy standpoint moving forward that we're focused on. Electric propulsion, a lot of interest there from the flight training community to enable electric propulsion. Obviously, with Mosaic, there's a proposal to now, instead of combustion engines being limited to that, it will, as a proposal to allow, any type of propulsion with light sport aircraft. So in view of that, this exemption to New Vision Aviation was granted recently. They petitioned on behalf of the cities of Mendota and Ridley in California. So essentially this now allows a light sport aircraft to be defined or can have electric propulsion contrary to the 1.1 definition. And then, of course, that opens the door to that LSA aircraft now being used for flight training. Electronic pilot certificates. This is a kind of a two-pronged activity. One is on the domestic side of the house. We're calling the electronic airman certificate. So as you can imagine, it would be having your electronic your airman certificate on your iPhone, your mobile device, and this also opens the door to some of the other activities that were requested through statute years ago when it came to pilot biometrics and those type of things. So we see those type of things opening up when it comes to electronic pilot certificate. So that's what's happening on the domestic side of the house with respect to that. And then on the international side of the house, ICAO, the International Civil Aviation Organization, has produced some SARPs with respect to the requirements for electronic personnel licensing, across the board. So this initiative domestically will support that initiative internationally as well. So China, Brazil, and I think Argentina may be already moving with their versions of electronic pilot certificates as well. So those are just a sampling of the policies and regulations that we're focused on and moving towards publication. So we'll see how all this dovetails with the FAA reauthorization, but we're moving forward with our process, and hopefully those things will be mutually supportive of one another. Influencing safety through data. So I think, as I've moved around the rooms, and you've seen even earlier today, data is king. And it's one of those things where, from my perspective, and I've expressed this to others, is that, when I come to events like this, I would like, specifically, and I'll just kind of focus on my group, for my group to be the first ones to stand up and share what the data is, what the pass rates are, what are some of the areas when it comes to ACS and PTS, where those sticking points are, what's happening and how that relates to accident data. And I would like all of that data, all the way across this little bubble rainbow that you're seeing here, to be data that is it's mutually supportive of one another. It feeds back on each other for continuous improvement. It's the same data that you would pull, so that when we stand up here, we're all looking at the same numbers and we're understanding what it means and then what to do about it. That would be kind of the nirvana for me to get that. So having one step, which is to have the entire pilot training and certification system under the one roof in the training and certification group in the General Aviation Commercial Division, is a step in that direction. So we have one of our folks that's really looking at the data, what's out there in this area and where are the gaps, and we're starting to kind of identify that and start to make moves towards closing those gaps. Because I think the more data we have, we can start getting the reasons behind the data, and maybe instead of having anecdotal discussions about what may be causing, is it poor training, is it poor policy, whatever it is, we can just help zero in on what those issues are and then help to create it. So that's what that slide's all about. Okay, lastly, the Part 141 pilot school modernization. So, there was some statutory language that asked for the FAA to look into how to improve training under 61 and 141, specifically modernize it. So we are in the process now of drafting an aviation rulemaking committee charter. And for those of you that don't know, an aviation rulemaking committee, it's a committee that has members from FAA as well as industry, there's some already expressed desires. You heard it this morning about increased collaboration between the FAA and industry prior to rulemaking. I mentioned ex parte. That's one of the challenges of the Administrative Procedures Act, where you can't engage in those discussions once rulemaking starts. But an aviation rulemaking committee is one of those avenues where industry and FAA can collaborate openly about what the challenges are under Part 141, specifically in this case, and then it would result in a report that has recommendations that would go to the FAA for future rulemaking. So this activity is one that it's not one where we're looking to just kind of nibble around the edges of Part 141, change some words here, change some words there, make this clearer, make that more clear, even though that's something we do want to do. But this is, if you kind of want to look at it as a scale, one side to the other, from nibbling around the edges to like a full-scale revamp. This is more on the side of a full-scale revamp. It's a modernization effort, a whiteboard effort, and so being able to look at Part 141, what are some of the challenges there? I mean, a lot of the rule goes back to the 60s, 70s, and had some changes over the years, but I think there's been enough changes over the years, and certainly our leadership agrees that a Part 141 modernization arc is called for at this point in time. So what is that going to look like? So these are just kind of some of the draft tasks, because in an ARC charter, you have to provide tasks to the charter. So it's narrow enough in scope so that the ARC can do its work, but at the same time, it's broad enough so that you're not trying to keep the aperture so narrow that you can't go outside of that scope and then look at things that don't need to be looked at. So the words in red are just kind of a way to focus your attention on some of the goals out of the tasks as drafted now. So this isn't specific wording, but just kind of general wording. And again, this is all draft. So you can see there and you can read it for yourself. But hopefully what you recognize here are a lot of the same questions and issues that you see under Part 141, and these would be tasks of the ARC to look at, how to approach a future rulemaking effort. So, and here's some additional tasks as drafted. Give you a second to take a look at that. So this might not be kind of the final list, but I'm sharing the ARC charter with some folks. Just to the key industry stakeholders to get some feedback on what the charter looks like and what those tasks look like. So this is your opportunity through your organizations, your advocacy groups, in order to have your voice heard with respect to these things. The ARC membership is not one that is it'll eventually be decided and announced, but I from what I understand, this is my first time going through the process from inception, will be one where it's going to be an FAA decision on who the memberships are, and there's going to be an FAA co-chair and an industry co-chair as well. All right, that's the it's not the space shuttle, it's not an F-15, but all due respect to Charlie Precourt, he's got nothing on me. That's the old War Hoover there, and I love that airplane, and I think it's in a museum somewhere about now too. So I never thought it would happen, but. All right, what questions do you have for me? Charlie, how are we doing on time? Oh, perfect.
I'll make it fast. So we operate a flight school out of Kansas City, and we're also an FAA. I'm over here.
Oh, okay.
We're a FAA testing center as well. We're seeing a lot of testing centers closed down around the area, especially in the more rural areas. People are having to drive hours to come to our facility because facilities are closing near them. At this point, since the testing administrators have cut down the portion of the fees that we get to keep, we're more or less offering it as a service. We're no longer covering the square footage, covering the proctor fees. And this is just an example, and this is not an isolated incident, but somebody drove 3.5 hours to take the test. It glitched. He had to get back on the road to go pick up his kid and do it again the next week. And Obviously, there's nothing we can do when the testing administrator's site goes down, which happens a lot. Is there anything that's being done to kind of stop all these centers from closing down? Are you working with other possibilities, better opportunities, ways we can actually make money on testing again, so it's not just a service?
Yeah, it's interesting you ask that question. This is one of those areas that I mentioned that is that we have incorporated into our organization now. So that used to be in another division. So I'm just now kind of getting my hands around what all that process and what it means. But everything that I understand about that is that PSI, they have a process to look at the various testing centers across the nation, their location, what's the volume, the performance, those type of things. It's a no-cost contract with the FAA, so all of this is the FAA doesn't play a role in the charging of the fees and those type of things. It's all kind of a do loop there with PSI and the fees that they collect for each of the knowledge tests. But from what I understand, they have a very robust system where they are continually evaluating these things, what the performance is of all the testing centers, the location, again, like I said, the volume, and then trying to right size that. Obviously, you can't have a testing center at all the locations, nor, a PSI, as far as I know, can say, hey, this testing center is always going down, hey, they're out of there, let's get somebody else in. So, I don't know if I have a really good answer to your question, that I understand that there are anecdotal stories of things that happen in areas, and where that's, in a lot of cases, as far as you're going to drive far to get to that location if you need to go there, and then, unfortunately, if you get there and there's a problem, you're kind of stuck, and that's just kind of unfortunate with the way the system is. But I am digging into that. I'm going to try to understand more about that and see if there's anything that we can do from an FAA standpoint in relationship with PSI to improve those things. I'm sorry, I wish I could give you a better answer than that.
Hey, Everett, we have one more question. We have time for one more question if you can take it.
Yep, and I'll hang out in the back if anyone wants to kind of come up and have some chats afterward.
Hey, good morning. My name is Ryan Bolander, and I work for ForeFlight. ForeFlight is, as most of you are aware, the EFB that's in the cockpit with the students when they fly. My job at ForeFlight is to help schools standardize with ForeFlight and to get more situational awareness, safety, etc. But one thing I hear from a lot of schools is when it's time for the practical test, there's a large discrepancy between what a DPE is willing to accept in terms of electronic flight data versus paper data. So I was excited to see that there's going to be some modernization around training and around new technologies, but specifically, could you talk about that particular part in the process when really the FAA meets flight training with in ForeFlight or another electronic flight bag is right there as something that is new across the industry in terms of acceptance specifically by DPEs?
Yeah, thanks for your question. And this has been an issue also that's come up. I think I've had some sidebar discussions with ForeFlight and others about that. I think it goes to a lot of the issues having to do with designees and DPEs specifically in standardization when it comes to things like that. We've heard the same thing with angle of attack indicators, things in the cockpit where, hey, there needs to be standardization when it comes to the utilization of those type of technologies, how to appropriately not just train towards them at the flight schools, but test towards them when it comes time for practical tests, et cetera. So it's a bit of a standardization issue, and I'm sure that if our delegation group was here, they could absolutely speak to that. There's always an ongoing effort and communicate. I see Karen, I know other designees out here, and I know those are things that I have conversations with them around as well. We're constantly talking about standardization across the DPE community. So we're going to continue to work on it. I think you're going to see a lot of improvement around that. Hopefully now that we're all under the same roof, we're going to be zeroing in and trying to address these things and trying to show up here in force in order to speak specifically to some of the actions that can be done in that regard. But it's a continual process that we're always working towards. But I totally appreciate that, and I think that's something that we recognize too that needs to be done. So speaking of, and I'll wrap up, Charlie, with this, is that, I know it probably wasn't asked, but I know there's a lot of issues around examining authority, speaking about standardization. And so, I just came from another flight training conference, and then here, and, we're always hearing about examining authority and the consistency issues there as well from the safety assurance offices, the FSDOs. So I think one of my takeaways going back is I'm going to do everything I can so then when we show up to events like this, we have the support from the safety assurance side of the house, so that they can speak. Because as in the safety standards, we can build the regulations around it. We can have policy around it. In the case of examining authority, we recently put out a notice that decreased the barriers that the safety assurance offices have to rise to when it comes to examining authority applications. They don't have to do 50%. ASIs don't have to do 50% of the practical tests, for example. That was a place where we could change policy because it wasn't rooted in regulation. But there's other consistency areas, interpretation, et cetera, out there when it comes to examining authority. So I'm going to have some conversations with safety assurance, see if they can come to these things and speak to that specifically. I think there's been some onesie and twosie success in that area, and so hopefully we can make that more consistent so we can stand up here as a safety assurance and safety standards team and give you guys the answers that you're looking for.
Well, thank you very much, Everett. Thanks for joining us.